Hello and welcome to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Experts session for mechanical engineering. This industry webinar was hosted by our careers consultant Amy Kingsman, and she was joined by Hugo Winey, who after studying mechanical engineering at Newcastle University went on to transfer his skills and look at a career within the investment management industry. They're also joined by Jack Steele, another alumni of the mechanical engineering programme at Newcastle, who after completing his studies went on to a graduate role with React Engineering. Each of our guests are going to provide us a short talk and presentation to tell you a little bit more about themselves, their time at university and their careers to date. Amy will then lead them in a Q&A with questions that have been submitted prior from you, the partner students. Without any further ado, we're going to hand over to Jack to tell you a little bit more about himself and React Engineering.
Okay, so as mentioned, I'm Jack Steele, and I currently work for a company called React Engineering. So I've just prepared a few slides just to, as Amy said, go a bit through my background and the sort of things that I've been doing and what I do now. So quick introduction to myself. I live over in the Lake District, so the northwest. I was at Keswick School for secondary school, where I did my GCSEs and my A levels. I think for me, I always knew that sort of engineering was the way I wanted to go, so I picked my A levels with that very much in mind, and ended up doing further maths, chemistry, and physics. So I've always had that sort of that route, and as I put there, I've had a bit of a family influence with exposure from a young age. So my dad's a chartered mechanical engineer, and so he does a lot of work on the sort of things that I'm actually really interested in. So that's just sort of tailored. I think sort of tailored the way that I think and the way I see my career going as well. So obviously I was at Newcastle Uni for 4 years. I started in 2015 and graduated around this time last year. Obviously doing mechanical engineering, and that was the integrated masters that they do. And obviously I really enjoyed my time at uni. You learn an awful lot, and it's a lot of good experiences as well. And on top of that, I tried to make sure I was doing some summer placements just to sort of boost my experience, really. It gives you something a bit extra on your CV to be able to talk about. So I've put there's the logos for Nuvia and for Sellafield Limited. It was actually before I went to uni, I did some summer placements with Sellafield, working quite closely with one of the project managers for one of their major projects, which I was really fortunate to get the chance to do, and I learned an awful lot from. And then after first year of uni, I went to work for Nuvia for the summer, and they're another sort of engineering, more design, more like calculation company that also do a lot of work for Sellafield. So sorry, a bit of context for Sellafield. Sellafield, if you might not know, is the nuclear site over in the northwest in Cumbria over here, and is essentially the hub for a lot of what goes on in the northwest. So yeah, after first year, I worked for Nuvia for the summer, and that was another really good experience. And it's just another thing that it sort of builds up your confidence and gets you on the right sort of track. So obviously, as I said, I'm now with React Engineering, and that actually came about after my third year of university. I did a summer placement with React, and at the end of that, they were pleased with how I'd performed and asked if I wanted to go back once I'd finished uni. So for me, it was sort of a bit of a no-brainer. I'd enjoyed what I'd been doing, and it was the sort of thing I wanted to get into. And it made my fourth year of uni a little less stressful after having to search for jobs and things. So that's essentially my story. So a bit about React Engineering. Sorry, this is a bit wordy. I've literally picked this directly from the website. So obviously, if you want to know any more about React, it's all on the website. But essentially, we're an engineering consultancy with a dynamic team of it's about 40 employees. And about 3 directors, and the founding directors are still sort of consulting the consultants, if you get what I mean. But obviously, it's that dynamic team, and all with the common passion of sort of, as I said before, it's all in the nuclear, mostly in the nuclear industry, making sort of cleanup happen, adding value to different projects and things like that. So as it says at the bottom there, it was founded in 1994. So last year we celebrated the 25th anniversary, which was nice to get involved in. And sort of as I think the nuclear sector is definitely a good one to be in because there's always going to be work there, especially at Sellafield for hundreds of years. So we're definitely in a good place. Moving on, a little bit more about React. So as I've sort of alluded to, it's based in Cumbria, obviously benefiting from being in the Lake District. So stressful work in the week, but then you go out and enjoy the lakes and the mountains at the weekend, and it's you can't really complain. So at React, we have 3 main project strands. So I put there consultancy, technology, and project management. So the consultancy really being the main one. The technology is, you can see the picture in the bottom right there. That's done. That picture has been taken by some technology that has stemmed out of React into React helped set up a sister company called Createch, which look at sort of radiometric scanning, so scanning complex nuclear environments to sort of build up your map of where your real issues are. And that picture in the bottom right is a picture of, I think it was Fukushima, can't remember. So at React we have a huge variety of projects. As I said before, most of our work is being completed for Sellafield. And that picture in the middle there is a picture of Sellafield. So as you can see, it's almost like a little town within itself, and there's so many different things going on. There's always something different to get involved in. So that fourth point there, as I've said, we don't really specialize in designing calculations. I think it mentions it on the previous slide, but they call a lot of what we do in consultancy sort of front end management, where it's more looking at adding value to projects rather than designing the next big thing or something. But as I sort of mentioned about Createch, that's more their side, so we sort of get involved in that a little bit, and it's definitely vital to have a solid understanding of those principles in all the work that we do. And the last point on there is about the React Foundation, which is a charity that was set up by React Engineering to sort of encourage it's all of React sort of STEM work and encouraging the younger generation, mostly within West Cumbria, to get into engineering and sort of showing off things that you can do in engineering. And as I put there, we were fortunate enough to receive the Queen's Award for volunteering this year, which was quite an honour. Finally, I thought I'd just give a bit of a brief overview about my project. I know we've not got loads of time, and there might be some more questions, but as I've sort of mentioned, a lot of the stuff that we do at React is massively varied. And so obviously I was there for the summer and after third year for about 10 weeks. And then I restarted with React last year at the end of August. So it's been about 10 months that I've been there now. But over those 10 months, I mean, those headings might not mean as much to you, but to me, they're a huge variety of projects. So I'll just give you a bit of an overview of each of them. So that first one, the fire detection systems category, that's directly on the Sellafield site, and that's a category within what they call categorized projects, which looks at standardizing the way you do a certain project to gain the efficiencies of repetition and sort of a standard delivery model. So obviously that's looking at sort of fire alarms and fire dampers and things like that. But for my role within that's more of a project management role. So I am project managing 7 of our different projects, which are all looking at different facilities. Some have similarities, some are completely different. So again, that huge variety and things that I get to see. But for me, that's more project management development. So the Calder Hall programmatic approach. If you have heard of Sellafield, you might have heard of Calder Hall. Calder Hall was the first nuclear facility to generate commercial power in the world. And it was back in the 1950s that it supplied a town in West Cumbria called Workington with nuclear power. So that's quite a big thing. Obviously, that was 60 plus years ago now, and they're at the stage where they've defueled the 4 reactors, and they're planning on they have to come up with a plan of how they're going to deal with what's left over within the sort of Calder Hall site within Sellafield. So for us, the programmatic approach was looking at the essential independencies and the logic links between how you'd want to do your decommissioning works or your demolition works, based on the sort of hazards that are involved, sort of asset care work that's required at different stages throughout the life cycle, and also the sort of the national sort of drive for how you want to decommission those reactors. So those are all things that we had to take into account. So moving on, there's the cyber projects, which is obviously very different. So we've had project management, we've had sort of understanding decommissioning roles, and now this is cyber projects, and there's two different ones there. But basically these are both, it's having to understand the sort of cyber secure technical information sort of side of everything. And in those we're just sort of supporting the project manager, and in the cyber secure by design case it's the head of cybersecurity on the Sellafield site we're working directly for, to develop this manual for how cybersecurity should be built into every process on site. Obviously the cybersecurity is becoming more and more important with how everything's coming online, especially even calls like this. There's all sorts of things that you have to have in place. So there's a lot of work to do there, and again it's very different and very interesting. So interim states was looking at one facility in particular on site. Most of the facilities, especially operational facilities, will have what they call a baseline, which looks at sort of in which periods they'll be doing what operations. So it may have been in 2010 to 2020 they were doing operations. In 2020 to 2025 they were doing some clean out of the operations, and then that carries on to your eventual end point, which is usually decommission, demolition to base lab, land reuse, which may be 20-30 years in the future. So our interim states project was looking at one of the facilities, and it's having to understand that baseline and sort of research and understand opportunities for changing the baseline to either accelerate the hazard reduction or reduce the costs associated with it. So that was another interesting one. Resource profiling is as simple as it sounds, but we're working directly for one of the heads of the main value streams on site. So it was even though it was quite simple, the work that we're having was going to have a huge impact on the way things are done on site. And finally, the feasibility study is for a process that they call alpha sort and segregation. So that's looking at taking waste from the alpha side, so alpha referring to the primary isotopes involved with those sorts of wastes. And it's taken those wastes and seeing if you can size reduce and decontaminate them to either get them down to like recyclable levels or at least low level waste, rather than the current higher level waste routes that they go down, just to reduce the future dependency on those higher level waste streams and try and reduce the costs associated with that as well. So that's sort of a quick whistle stop tour of the sort of things that I've been working on currently, and to sort of bring that back to what I did at uni. You'll have probably noticed that I've not mentioned anything about sort of the calculation side, the design side, and that's because we don't really do that sort of thing. As I said before, it's vital that we have an understanding of it and we know how to apply those principles. But for me, the big thing that prepared me at uni was that sort of mechanical engineering mindset. It's the sort of questioning mindset, the wanting to understand the problem and trying to figure out how you can get to the solution sort of thing. So it's not something you learn directly, but it's throughout your time at uni, it's something that you gradually pick up through the different things that you work on. And I think that's definitely helped get me to where I am now. So I tried to rush through that. I know I've probably gone on a little bit more, but that's it from me.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack. That's been really insightful. We will take questions, but we'll just take them all together at the end. So we'll hand over now to Hugo and hear his presentation, and then we'll come back for questions as a collective at the end. Great, thanks, Jack.
Hi
Hugo,
there.
You're there. Yes. Okay. If you're ready and you can share your screen, if you want to share your screen, I'll just unmute myself and you can start.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, I don't have slides, so you guys are just going to have to, unfortunately, stare at me for the next next few minutes as I give you a little overview of what I'm doing. Obviously, um, I guess I'm here to talk to you more about if you choose to do mechanical engineering, but you don't necessarily end up in that field, which is what's essentially happened to me. So I studied mechanical engineering at Newcastle, and I graduated in 2016 with a B.Eng. And to be honest, I got kind of halfway through and realized I didn't necessarily want to follow a mechanical engineering career. But to be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And one thing I will definitely suggest is always have a look at the different societies and the different challenges and things that the university offers, because I actually got involved with the University Business Challenge, where we competed against other universities on some simulation tests, and that was actually really and got kind of kickstarted my interest more in the business world. And we were a mechanical engineer only team, and we were I think only the second ever team to get to the final of that challenge, because it's normally business school students and they have support from that. So it was quite a kind of a flying the flag for mechanical engineering, but that really kickstarted my interest. And when I graduated in 2016, I went and studied international trade. I did a master's at EPAG Business School in Paris, which was a very good kind of, I had this interest in business, but I didn't really have any foundational knowledge. So that was a very good to build the foundations of that business kind of acumen. And also it was my first chance to sort of apply some of the not necessarily direct skills from mechanical engineering to something else. And I realized that certain things like report writing, giving presentations, and proper research and proper sourcing, all those sorts of things were really helpful in my master's degree and then later in my career, because it's the kind of thing that you're not usually taught in other kinds of courses. And especially the project management aspect, being able to manage your time properly, has been invaluable to me in my career. So after I finished business school, I still didn't have a job, and I moved back to, well, I grew up in Suffolk originally, but I moved to London, and I started working, I guess kind of cramming in all the summer internships I should have done into one sort of 3-month period where I worked for a recruitment company where I worked as like a temp, and they would send me out to various industries. So I worked in recruitment, I worked in a hedge fund, I worked in a fintech company, and kind of gave me exposure to different working environments. And actually my first job out of university was a company that I had temped at, and I expressed interest. It was a hedge fund, and they had somebody leaving in their business development team, and I actually joined through that connection. And since then I've moved from there to another small investment manager, which is actually in May was acquired by a firm called Investcorp. So I now work for a firm called Investcorp, which is an alternative investment manager managing about $30 billion across real estate, private equity, credit management, and what they call absolute return investments, which is basically hedge funds. And my role in there is I work in the business development team, which effectively kind of encompasses everything from assisting the investment teams in product design all the way through to raising assets for those products and funds or deals. They're all structured in various weird and wonderful ways. But essentially our role is to work with the investment teams on identifying how saleable an idea is, how much demand there is in the market. And we go out, we speak to people, we determine if they have a need for that product. And once that product becomes kind of fully cooked along with the investment teams, then we will go out and essentially raise the money for it. And typically that involves going out and raising a kind of what they call a seed investor, which is they might take a little bit of a revenue share or something like that from the business, but they'll also provide the first, they're essentially taking the risk, and they're the first investor. So that's always challenging, and especially working across lots of different product lines, and you always seem to have a million things going on. And that's where I'll kind of loop back and say that the project management side is really, it's been invaluable, because certain things, I mean, I was working on, because of the acquisition, when my company was bought, we have a lot of integration projects going on. And, I just, as a simple example, I built a Gantt chart for one stream of that, which we always have, since my first year, I think we used Gantt charts to track and monitor projects and make sure all the deliverables were on time. And they'd never seen it before. They were so excited about it. So that's kind of a good example of how something simple that you might not, it's just a tool to help you in engineering, can actually transfer to another real world application. And I will definitely say that, you will have if you do study mechanical engineering, you'll have a lot of contact hours. I'm sure that's fresher in Jack's mind than it is mine, but it's a lot. You're in lectures a lot of the time. You get very used to working to tight deadlines and producing a lot of content in a very short period of time. And I think that's another thing that's just really, really valuable in anything that you do, to be able to, deliver something on time with with the level of quality and the level of detail that is expected. I'll definitely say, those kinds of skills. The math is hard, but actually I'm glad that I got it out of the way then, because compared to when we're doing analysis and things, the maths that you do in my world, okay, so on the investment side, it gets more complicated, but from my perspective, it's kind of a breeze. So it's definitely very helpful. And I mean, I don't want to kind of talk about myself too much. So I think maybe if you want to open it up to questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the investment management industry, or about, necessarily just looking for a career that might be outside the stream that you're working in, because I did it the hard way, and I can probably guide you to do it a slightly easier manner than I did, if I can help at all.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Hugo. I will just go over to sort of question side now. So just thank you so much again to both of you. There are some really great insights into industry there. We obviously now have some time to take questions from you. So first of all, I would I'd like to ask both of you, how long did it take you to get into your first graduation role after your degree?
Do you want me to? I'll go first.
Yep.
So for me, I was, as I sort of mentioned, I was quite fortunate in doing my summer placement while I was still at uni. It sort of set me up nicely for when I finished. So I had quite a bit of flexibility with regards to when I wanted to start. And I think I just gave myself a few months just to after finishing uni to obviously collect my thoughts and before starting. So I was quite fortunate in that respect. But I know friends who didn't do placements, and friends who did mechanical engineering who didn't do the placements, but still ended up in a graduate role around the same time as mine, like September, August time.
Fantastic. Hugo?
There we go. Yeah, I guess I probably did things a little bit backwards, but after I graduated from my master's degree, I guess my first permanent real job was in the following January. I will say that because I hadn't done my master's degree again, when it was end of August, so it was a full 12 months with no summer, so there wasn't that kind of gap or that placement time. But I would say I found the temp roles that I was working in quite quickly. It didn't, I was sending my CV out for probably a week or two, and then the opportunity came up. And I think that, I would always recommend, while you're studying, to look at placements, look at things like that, look at, graduate schemes, and get that locked in early. And that's a great opportunity, and they're much less stressful learning opportunities, I think. But I will say that, if you don't get onto the graduate scheme that you want to, or if you're struggling to find the right thing, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I see lots of jobs now. I have friends that recruit, and they do graduate recruitment, and they have lots of opportunities now that aren't necessarily going through the big graduate programs. And I certainly say, at least in my industry, that trend, it was very strong when it was weakening when I started, but now I'm seeing a lot more direct graduate recruitment, not through the kind of off cycle, not through the usual recruiting cycles. So definitely don't feel discouraged. I applied to a lot of graduate schemes, and obviously I didn't get onto any of them. So it's not the end of the world, but I will definitely say that you do need to spend some time. Definitely go talk to the careers facilities at the university. That's something that I utilized a bit, but I wish I'd utilized more, and they'll help with CV writing and cover letter writing and your interview skills. As long as you have those down, you'll never have an issue, even if it's not through the usual recruiting cycle.
I'm actually curious to know, Hugo, how you found recruitment agencies and how you knew which ones to apply through.
So I was actually, at first I didn't know anything about them, and I actually got on I was found them through the jobs boards, just things like Indeed. I was on eFinancial Careers as well, because that was kind of the trend that I was going towards. But
is that a website, the Financial Careers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Specifically for financial services recruitment. And what will often happen is you'll have companies directly post jobs, but a lot of the times they don't want people to know they're hiring and how much they're offering and things, so they'll go through a recruitment agency. Recruitment agencies are useful in the sense that obviously they do a lot of the back and forth for you, and they will put your CV out to jobs that they really think you're better for. I would be a bit cautious of them, because they can kind of, some of them can promise the world, some of them can kind of push you into a role because they want to fill it and it's not necessarily right for you. So you just have to be I know it's difficult when you're looking for a job and you really, you want a job very badly, but it's definitely make sure that you don't put yourself in a situation where you're taking a job just because it's been offered and you're really not going to enjoy it. Because I took a temp job that I really didn't think I'd gotten. I thought the interview went terribly. And they offered it to me, and it was terrible. I wasn't there for very long. So I would definitely say, be strong in your conviction about what you do and don't want to do when dealing with them, because they do have an incentive to fill jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just a slightly different pathway. Obviously on campus we have a lot of events with, graduate recruiters, big companies and organisations. So going through a recruitment agency, it's just a sort of different way. So I was just quite keen to highlight that and sort of hear your story with it. So great. We have some more questions here. If you've still got time to take some, I think we've got some more time. How do you feel university helped you? I don't know if that's quite a broad question, but either of you, it's up to yourself.
So just how has it helped?
Yeah, is it, or has it helped? I don't know.
Well, I think it definitely has. So for me, it's the whole university experience for me, it was about getting that first bit of independency. So I mean, obviously I'd done some work and stuff before, but it's like moving away from your family, and it teaches you a lot about how, sort of as Hugo was saying, it's important to manage your own time, manage what you're doing effectively if you're going to end up doing a good job. So I think it probably taught me a lot in that sense, in terms of how I need to look after myself and manage my own time and make sure that I'm doing what I need to do a good job and be happy while I do it. I think for me, it was like I was saying before about engineering specifically. In addition to all of the content that Hugo was saying, that the huge amount of content that you get in mechanical engineering, it's that sort of that mindset, as I was alluding to before, about how to define and solve problems. That was probably the biggest thing for me.
And I guess I'll add a little bit. I mean, I think Jack's covered most of it, to be honest. Like he said, obviously you get that first bit of independence, and it's, there's nobody that's going to, I think the biggest shock for me was there's nobody that's going to tell you to study. There's nobody that's going to tell you, it's going to manage your time and tell you you've got an exam coming up in a week. You really do have to, and that's not just for engineering, that's for any stream. You really do have to manage your time properly, and, kind of you do a lot of growing up in quite a short time frame. I will say also, I guess that, the university itself, outside of the degree, as Jack rightly pointed out, the problem solving aspect and things like that, it's invaluable, really. But outside of that, the university itself is very good. There's all kinds of societies to get involved in. There's all sorts of events. I remember I didn't unfortunately get to go, but they had Richard Branson speaking when I was there. There's always something going on, and I think the one thing that's important is to try something, even if you might not necessarily think it'll stick. Just explore, because it's really is your opportunity to go and figure things out and figure out what you like and what you don't like in a kind of broader sense of being in an unconstrained environment. So I think that from that aspect, it really helped kind of cement what I was interested in rather than just what I assumed I'd be interested in.
It's interesting you mentioned the societies and the sort of extracurricular things we have going on in campus. When you were applying for sort of graduate jobs and things, did you find that employers were interested in that type of thing, or were they asking about your extracurricular activities? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, to be honest, a lot of them, especially when I was still studying for my master's and I was, I had that in progress, but they'd kind of say, they'd look at my CV and they'd say, well, why you went from engineering to this, how did that kind of go along? And I think the extracurricular activities really helped cement that. Partially, I did the University Business Challenge. I also did I think it was the Newcastle, they did like an apprentice competition. I was involved in that. And I think that shows kind of that you're willing to, certainly to a recruiter and to a prospective employer, that shows that you're willing to look at other things and not just kind of constrain yourself. And a lot of employers really appreciate that, in the sense that they know that you're not just going to say, this is my job, I don't do anything else. You're willing to pitch in, you're willing to help with other projects, and you just have kind of an intellectual curiosity that people will find very, very, very useful. Because I think I read somewhere that the average person changes careers 2.5 times in their life, not jobs, careers. So that ability to transfer and move over, even within your own stream, I have friends that have worked in kind of, engineering graduates who've worked in design, on the design aspect, and then they've moved to a consulting aspect. Even that lateral movement within one industry is, it's good to show that you have other interests and that you can take on other things other than just your kind of core responsibilities.
Great, thank you. Got some more questions here. How important is relevant work experience when trying to get a graduate job?
Very.
That's okay.
It was very, very useful for me, at least. I think I mentioned it before. It's that extra thing on your CV that just helps you stand out. And it's not just your CV, but it's personally. So for me, as I was saying, it develops your confidence. Sort of helps with the sort of independent skills that you need to have, and it also sort of comes in hand in hand with the work that you have to do at uni, and that if you can develop those skills earlier on, it will help you uni, and equally helping you uni will help you develop those skills when you're in industry. So honestly, I'd say sort of summer placements, year placements, any sort of experience that you can get is really invaluable to sort of helping progress your career. And even if so, you've sort of got the two ends of the spectrum of me and Hugo here. I've always known that I've known it could have gone differently, but I've always known that the sort of mechanical engineering route was where I wanted to go, into the sort of nuclear sector. Obviously Hugo thought he wanted to go that way, but actually I ended up finding out otherwise. And that's one of the benefits with mechanical engineering. You can get in, it gives you all those different options, and if you're doing different placements along your journey, you'll start to find out which things you enjoy and which things you don't enjoy. And it's definitely very beneficial.
And how did you go about finding placements and things, Jack? Did you have a process, or how did you start that?
So there's quite a lot of west, sort of where I am in Cumbria is quite good. Obviously, I said it. A lot of everything stems around Sellafield. I'm quite fortunate in my dad's involvement in helping with a few things. But there's all sorts of so I first got in touch with React when I was doing my GCSEs at Keswick, because they offer bursaries and awards for people who are heading into engineering. So there's one at GCSE level and then one at A level. So that was when I first got into meeting React. So then when it came to applying to React for my summer placement, they were actually over in Newcastle doing a bit of a talk, and the React careers lady recognised me and I recognised her from those award nights. So we just went and had a chat. And she said, "Yeah, if you fancy it, just apply." And then so it's obviously you have to be looking out for the opportunities, and I've been quite fortunate in how it's all sort of worked out nicely for me. But there's also been times where I've just thrown out CVs and things. So in my third year, I was throwing out CVs for all sorts of placements, and it just worked out nicely that I ended up at React. So you've got to put a bit of work into it usually, but there's always loads of options, and even if you don't think there's an option, fire your CV over to a company because they might have something. No harm in asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that point you made there about even sending your CV to companies and organisations, even if they've not got a job or something advertised. There's absolutely no harm in doing that. So yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. Hugo?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that I think Jackson hit the nail on the head with everything there. I would also add, I guess, that doing work placements before you kind of go into your first graduate role, it's really, really useful because it also tells the employer that you can be trusted in a professional environment. They know that you can be around, whether it's you're in the field or whether you're in an office, they know that you know how to handle yourself and that they can kind of trust that. Whereas if you haven't ever really done anything, they know you might be a great student, but you might not necessarily know how to handle yourself. And things that you don't even think about, like using Outlook is such simple things that I remember when I was temping, it was my first one, I think, and I had to cancel a meeting, a big company-wide meeting on Outlook, and I just deleted the meeting from somebody's calendar. I didn't actually cancel it, so everybody showed up.
Oh goodness!
And I got quite a telling off for that. So it's better to make those mistakes when you're an intern than when you're actually working in a professional capacity, or a paid professional capacity, I guess. But I definitely think definitely try and do as many things like that as time allows. And if you're unsure about where you want to go, try and get a little bit of a variety, because that's really at the end of the day, it's about figuring out what you enjoy doing as opposed to what you kind of think you'd like the idea of. I think that's something that I learned when I was bouncing around industries doing temp work, is you might like the idea of something, but the reality might actually be quite different to your perception. So it's definitely, that practical experience really, really helps you decide what you want to do as well.
I think you're absolutely right in saying that at the start of your career, you can maybe get away with a bit more. So placements and internships are a really good opportunity to learn from mistakes, and employers will generally be a bit more forgiving when you make these sort of errors. Once you actually go into the world of work, maybe not quite so much. So placements can be quite good for that. I suppose as well, it's an opportunity to just get to know contacts and networks and things as well. So that can be a really good opportunity to go into industry in that respect. So yep, okay, great, thank you. I think we've just got a few more. Just keep my eye on the time here. Is work experience more important to employers than other extracurricular activities such as being a student athlete? What do you think about that one? I know we've kind of touched on both now, so maybe comparing both sort of academia with extracurricular, what do you think would be more important to employers, or is either more important?
I think it's hard to say, and I definitely wouldn't want to speak for any particular employer, but obviously if you can show that you've developed skills that will help in that particular area that you're looking to be employed in, it's going to be a huge benefit. I'm not saying that employers don't care about extracurricular stuff. I'm sure they definitely do, and it definitely shows that there's more to you as a person rather than just you're happy to go and sit in a room all day and do calculations or something like that. But yeah, I think obviously it depends on what sort of placement and stuff you do, but obviously it's going to be beneficial, even like Hugo was saying, even if it's nothing to do with the area that you're going into, if you can show that you've developed sort of those personal and professional skills, then it's a huge plus. But equally, there's probably extracurricular things you can do, such as Hugo's business and the business challenge that will help develop those skills as well. So it sort of varies, I imagine.
Yeah, I guess I can just add a little bit onto that. I think it really does depend on the employer. Some like to see lots of work experience. Some like to see that you didn't just spend all of your time in the library and that you went out and you got involved in other things. Because you do kind of just by proxy learn certain skills by doing extracurricular activities that might not necessarily be that academic. I mean, I've been asked about. I wrote for the student newspaper when I was in Newcastle. Not the Tab, it was a different one.
Okay.
I don't know if the Tab still exists, but it was I wrote for a different one for a little while, and I used to get asked about it quite a bit in interviews, because they would see the ability to write articles and things, which is kind of a skill that you just might not ordinarily develop, and they think, oh, so for producing marketing materials or for certain parts of report writing it can help. So you never know when something's going to help, but equally don't get too hung up on how stuff is going to look to prospective employers, because different things matter to different people. I mean, my girlfriend works in insurance. She's an underwriter, and when she was interviewing for her current job, she did at her previous firm, she did a tall ships race, and they went and they sailed all up around Norway. And I guess the guy that was interviewing her, the head of the team, is a sailing enthusiast. So they spent the whole interview talking about that. And you just never know when something's going to come in handy. So, definitely do the work experience. Definitely try and do work experience to help you develop the professional side of your kind of repertoire. But equally, definitely I would say, if you can and if it interests you, do get involved in other things, because one, you'll have a lot of fun, and two, you never know when those skills might come in handy.
I think that's a really good point, actually. And I think, just going back to the example you said about your girlfriend there, is that the more things you are involved in, the more likelihood is you're going to have something in common with someone you're speaking with. So it's just opening yourself up to the opportunities. And I think you are right in saying, though, that don't just do things because it'll look good or something like that. I suppose it's about having that passion and enthusiasm for things, but being open to trying opportunities on campus or out with campus, and etc. And I suppose as well, I don't know if both of your experiences are with this, but being involved in things that are going on in university, extracurricular, etc., also opens up your networks and around university as well. And then you'll find that one maybe opportunity leads to another, and before you know it, you're going to an event about something else, and it just kind of maybe spirals. I don't know if you maybe experienced with that, but sometimes these things can happen on the back of that. I'm just going to ask one last question. What are the most important factors to consider when applying for a job, do you think?
Location, what you're actually going to be doing. If you actually think you're going to enjoy it, I think that's probably a big one. I think Hugo alluded to it earlier. You need to be sure of what it is you're signing up for, essentially. It's not too bad when you're looking for experience, but if you're looking for somewhere, say you're going to be tied in for a grad scheme for 2 years, you don't really want to be going somewhere that you could know off the bat that you aren't really going to enjoy. So I think that's a big one. So it's being where you want to be and essentially doing what you want to do. I think obviously the two obvious but pretty important ones. I think other than that, it's just that's pretty much it. I think just doing what you want to do.
It's interesting what you were even saying about location, because obviously you're quite local and you've managed to stay quite local, but actually the location's played quite a significant part in your career. And then Hugo, on the other hand, is sort of relocated to London, but London's played quite a significant role in his career. So it's interesting, that sort of location thing, and taking that into account when you're looking at careers and thinking about opportunities and what industries and sectors are sort of popular in particular areas and things like that. So yeah, good point.
Exactly, yeah. And you've as much as you've got to enjoy the work you do, you've got to enjoy where you are when you do it. It's like I was saying about being able to go and enjoy the Lake District on the weekend. If you find work particularly stressful, but then you don't actually enjoy where you live and don't get to go out and have those fun times, it's going to be harder for you to sort of keep up with the work and keep that sort of positive lifestyle.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about location, actually, because I was reading an article this morning about, it was relative to the States, but it's relevant here too, is that a lot of people, because of the coronavirus, everybody's been working from home. A lot of people are reevaluating where they're living, and they're sort of thinking, a lot of jobs that can be done remotely, people are saying, well, why do I cram myself into a packed train every day at 7 a.m, which I have been very much enjoyed not doing for the last 3 to 4 months. But yeah, I think that's a key one. Make sure you want to live there, because at the end of the day, you do want to live there. You do have to live there. And as the trend, starts to go towards more, the jobs that can be done remotely. I mean, I have colleagues and friends that work, 2-3 days in the office, 2-3 days at home. They alternate. So it's becoming, a lot more important to really be somewhere that you want to be. But in terms of the actual job itself, I would say, make sure that your CV is quite kind of clear and concise. This is, obviously the careers, the Career Center can help with that a lot more. But I mean, I remember the first time I wrote a CV, it was just blathered on about myself for ages. And and when you get, the older you get, you realize that employers kind of spend, I think the average is 15 seconds. And I've done that job, scan CVs for jobs, and you'd spend about 15-20 seconds on each one. So they really just want to see that you have relevant experience. And then when they want to hear about you, you'll have that kind of first conversation. But also, don't be afraid to ask what the day-to-day is of a job. That's a question I always ask. And even though it's very generic, is, what is a typical day in this role? Because job descriptions tend to be some are very good and specific, but a lot of them tend to be quite vague. And you also do get, tasks are dressed up. They might say contribute to company-wide global projects, and you just end up taking minutes on every single meeting and not actually doing anything. So you do have to, obviously don't be rude about it or anything like that, but just want to know what the day-to-day of a job looks like, and then make sure that that's something that you're comfortable doing for 8-9 hours a day.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point, actually, you make about the job descriptions and having that sort of critical eye when you're looking at a job description, really sort of looking at it and thinking, what will I actually be doing, and taking that apart. And I suppose there's no harm in even, asking the employer before you apply to a role, or reaching out to them and asking, what does this involve, or what does this mean? And just sort of taking that approach before, rather than committing to something and realizing 2 weeks down the line, actually, this isn't for me. So definitely spending that time with the critical focus on job descriptions, which will then help you with the writing of the job applications and things as well, when you actually understand properly what the role is. So I would say they're a real key part when you're looking at applying to jobs and things, for sure.
Absolutely. I would actually just I'm conscious of time, but just to say one more thing. What something I read that was very kind of insightful a little while ago in a book called What It Takes by a guy called Steve Schwartzman. And he said that, when he interviews people, he always likes to think of it as a conversation. And, when you're early in your career, you'll kind of be interrogated on what you studied, what you did, But it's very important to realize that you're not just applying for a job. The company is obviously looking for the right person to hire. So it's not necessarily about beating out the competition. It is about being a good fit for that role. So definitely don't be afraid to ask questions, or if you're unsure about things, or if you think that a certain aspect of it might not be what you want to do, or you're just unsure, don't be afraid to ask for kind of clarification or for a little bit more detail, because it also shows that you're interested in the role if you just talk about yourself. I've gotten interview feedback where I didn't get a job once, and they said I didn't ask enough questions about the company.
Right. Okay. That might be a good tip for anyone listening. Make
Yeah.
sure you ask lots of questions, and it's good to get that feedback as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and research the company before. They like to. I always, write sort of at least a half a page, just some key facts about it, what they do, some facts about the job, who the main people are. Make sure you know who you're meeting, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And just to end that, I think you just did make a really good point there towards the end of saying that looking for a job, it's a two-way process between you and the employer. So make sure that you are thinking about, am I the right fit for this role? Does it actually suit me? Because I think when you graduate, I think it was yourself, Hugo, that mentioned this to start with, that when you start applying for jobs, you're really keen to get a job, but it's just making sure that it's something that fits you and fits your requirements. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Thank you so much to both of you. That became really insightful. Got some really good insights and some little nuggets into jobs and applying to jobs and what it's like being a graduate in the graduate job market, etc. So thank you so much for coming along and joining us in the webinar this afternoon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Expert session. We hope you found the discussion and the presentations from our guests useful and insightful. Remember to stay up to date with further advice from alumni and industry professionals. Subscribe to our Newcastle University Career Service YouTube channel, and you can follow us on our social media channels at NCL Careers on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We hope to see you in September. Good luck and take care.